Hello, so I'm Jonathan Lurie. I work at MapTiler, and I'm a senior developer there. And I'm going to present MapTiler SDK that has been developing in the last month, but is available online already. So first, I'd like to start with a small introduction of what's MapTiler as a company. One slide. So we are based in Switzerland and Czechia, but we also have many people remote across Europe and recently also in the US. We create a lot of tools and applications related to displaying JS data. We do quite a lot of open source contribution. We curate, process, and create a JS dataset as well. As a business, we also host JS data for our customers, and we are doing quite a bit of R&D and many more JS things. So the team is quite diverse internally. We are like roughly 50 people, almost 50 people. So it's composed of cartographer, JS specialist, designer, UX specialist, software engineer, geocoding, copywriters, and all of them map lovers in general. So MapTiler SDK, so what is that? So it's a JavaScript and TypeScript open source library under license BSD3. It's a way to create interactive maps on the web. It's a way to access MapTiler Cloud API, geocoding, geolocation, and this kind of thing. It works with the free MapTiler account, and it's an extension of MapLibre GL. One point I haven't mentioned here is that there's no vendor lock-in, so it's an extension, but it can be using like any tile sets out there, and we don't force anything into using MapTiler Cloud. Yeah. So first, since it's an extension of MapLibre, it's worth making a recap as per why are we extending it. So MapLibre GL, it's a JavaScript TypeScript library to create interactive maps on the web. The pros are, for maybe those who don't know, it's pretty fast, it's pretty smooth. It's powered by GPU WebGL, so on the display side. It's compatible with many types of layers, so raster, vector, 3D models and stuff like that. The vector layers are super highly customizable, so you can display things of all sorts of color and all sorts of visual effects. It's open source and the community is very active. The cons, or at least the cons that we wanted to address, is that it doesn't come with any data. So for us, it's actually a pro because, for MapTiler, it's our business. So it's only about maps, so there's no geocoding in MapLibre. The developer experience can be a bit of a pain for setting up and styling layers, for example. There's no built-in multi-language support. Even though the styling make that possible, but it's kind of an advanced use case. And customization can be a bit overwhelming. And MapLibre has its own agenda, driven mainly by the community, and that's totally fine. The thing is that this agenda is not always aligned with MapTiler's agenda. So the points we are extending or working on is the cons part. So let's build on top of MapLibre. So you can see the blue circle in the middle is MapLibre, and we are not forking it in the sense that we continue to build on it. And as MapLibre advances and there's new features going on there, we still use the new features and continue to build around that. So as you can see, there's a lot of little MapTiler Lego around them. So that's basically the modularity of the SDK. And this outer layer is in communication with our servers, or at least if the user of our SDK is willing to use our data, which is not mandatory at all. So, for example, one of those modules is like the use of built-in styles that we make, that our cartographer and designer make. Language switching, auto-language detection based on system settings, access data on the cloud, generate static maps, geocoding, 3D terrain also to have like the whole DEM. And centering the map on user position might be a plus for our customers. So how to install it is like first fairly simple for people who are already versed with TypeScript and basically using NPM. So it's fairly easy to install. We also provide a CDN so that if you have a more simple use case, that might work better for you. And then what's new For some who may know, MapLibre comes with a very important object that is called map. So that's a class in TypeScript. And map already comes with many options so that you can, at the moment you create your map, you already can customize it. So the way we extend that is by adding few options. So the style, which was already present, but here in MapLibre, but here we are extending it with built-in types that are directly communicating with our server. So the good point is that if you're using VS Code, for example, as an editor, you type mapstyle dot, and then you have a whole list of styles available with a short description as per in what context you could use them. The terrain, whether true or false, by default it's false, but you can basically pop the terrain as at the moment you create the map, you instantiate it. You may want to have it with a bigger exaggeration. You can choose the language. So for example, here language dot, and then you'll have a completion list of a fairly long list of languages. Whether you want to geolocate, so by default it's false, but if you put it to true, the map is going to be centered on the end user location. So there's no GPS, so it's like kind of a rough location. It's not like your house. So, and then there is a few other controls. Some of them are already built in MapLibre, but has to be initialized from the outside and then later on added to the map. So we kind of nested this logic inside the constructor directly. So here, as we could see before, language Japanese, it's because here it's on Prizren and it's obviously not the local language. So as you can see, the main label for the city is written in Japanese, but the rest, all the other labels that don't have the Japanese label as will fall back to the local name. So yeah, here is basically another view. So the styles and the variation. So as I said, we have a team of cartographer and designer who are working on use cases. So whether they are internal or come from already existing customers, we are designing new maps. For example, the last that was designed is the one that is, they're all kind of blurry, but it's called backdrop. So it's a fairly minimal style for visualizing data. So there's less label, there's less line, there's less details, but there's hill shading. So that's one of the things we use for weather layers that I'm going to show later. So basically, every time you select a style, there might be variations such as like dark, light, or default. So yeah, in the end, there's quite a lot of them. And here on the first row, you could see all the variations of the street style. So the first one on the top left is the default street, but then there is a dark, a light, a night, and a pastel. They are all showing the same level of detail, the same kind of information. So basically, it's just the color scheme that changes. And on the row below, you have other examples of styles, though it's not exhaustive list, of course, but hybrid datavis.dark if you want to have your data visualization on the dark mode, and backdrop with nice hill shading, and and some other that you may recognize. So to create a map with a given style, you have many different options to do that. So you can do that at constructor time. So when you initialize your map, you do like map style equal map style outdoor, for example. But later on, you can always change the style of your map with the same shorthand, basically, like backdrop, for example. You can use the ID as it if you want to use a specific version, like here, Street V2, which is like the last version, but you may want to use V1 if you prefer for some reason. And on MapTiler Cloud, you can also design your own style. And when you design your own style, you will be given a fairly long ID, UID v4. So this is this long string of nonsense character that you can see here. That's the one you can use as well. But if you want to use another style that comes from another provider, you can always use the set style with a full URL, possibly with an API key if it's not your main API key that you want to use. It's a style designed by someone else, maybe. Or you can design dynamically your style and inject it as an object on the very last example here. Yeah. So setStyle as a function can accept different types of arguments. So if it's a string, or if it's just like on the second line, like MapStyle.backdrop, which is a shorthand, and then internally in the function we check, oh, is it an object, is it a string, or is it something like that. So this logic is partly borrowed from what is already existing in MapLibre. So we are kind of extending that to create like shorthand MapStyle.backdrop, for example, which we came up with. So multi-language support, it's something that we wanted to have because since we are data provider and map provider in a way, we don't really know who is the end user, and we don't really know in what language they prefer to see their map. So the same as for style, you can define the language at the very beginning when you construct your map, like language.english, for example. But you can later on set it after your map is initialized. You can change the language. You can use the shorthand language.albanian, or use ISO code, like the 2-letter ISO code, like SQ for Albanian, for example. And there are other tags or flags that are not exactly language, such as auto, local, Latin, non-Latin, or style lock. And auto, which is the default mode, if you don't specify the language, is going to look into your web browser language setting and try to, if it's possible, if it's available, to adapt the language to your settings. If you have multiple language in your web browser, it's going to take the first that is available in the SDK, so that in the end, when you look at the map, you see it in your own language. And style lock, it's a bit of a specific case, the very last one. For some usage, our cartographer have taken strong decision regarding the language. If it's a local map, for example, only on a specific area with specific language, or sometimes concatenation of labels, then if you use style lock, it makes it impossible to modify the language, at least with the set language function. You can always like dig deeper into that and change it sort of manually, but otherwise it's prevented. So yeah, here it's supposed to be a animated GIF, so it doesn't show. Basically rolling over different languages and showing Mediterranean countries, changing labels. But yeah, it's also compatible with right to left languages in a built-in way, so you don't have to install or to extend with a plugin. So Arabic and Hebrew are going to be supported by default. 3D terrain, so basically popping terrain on your map in a 3D, is also built in, so you don't have to add another layer with adding a data source. Like internally, since MapTiler provides this kind of data, we made it. We made a small abstract layer on top of the SDK, so that you can basically set terrain true with a given exaggeration. Or later on, after your map is initialized, you can do like enable terrain, or enable terrain with a specific exaggeration of your choice. Or then there's like set terrain exaggeration with the second argument being a Boolean, if whether you want to animate that, so in a smooth way, maybe that's your thing. Or disable terrain entirely, and then as you browse the map, it will stop fetching the terrain tile. So it's more conservative in terms of data. Yeah, here again, it's supposed to be animated GIF of like showing, but yeah, doesn't matter. Geocoding. So in addition to display map, we also provide API endpoint encapsulation. So basically, instead of pinging one of our endpoint on a low-level fashion, you would have function that encapsulate these codes. For example, here the geocoding dot forward. So if you look for Prizren, for example, you will have the response as a GeoJSON feature or feature collection, which is not exactly a top-level GeoJSON, so you still have to have like small encapsulation, but it's still a feature. So, and there's a lot of option to this function. So you may want to change the language, for example, or to have a proximity. If you want to have a priority on the result based on proximity of a given point, or a bounding box, or this kind of thing. So here, if we type Paris, for example, we are given some results, and they are ordered by relevance. And here is just like a few of them. So it's not super obvious, but it's written like the number in a square bracket at the beginning. So Paris, France is the first result. The second is also a city called Paris in Czechia. But later on, you could have like in Iran, for example, you would have like Parisa because it contains the substring Paris. It's still one of the match. So yeah, that's basically how it works. And you can define like how many results you want to have, and you can also change the ranking method. There are other API that I'll go maybe less in depth. So, for example, one is like reverse geocoding. Of course, if you want to have like longitude, latitude, a given point, and you want to know what kind of feature is there, also written as GeoJSON, you can have that. In MapTiler Cloud, we also have a service to host your own data. So, for example, your GPS tracks, for example, or any sort of GeoJSON data. And then you're given an ID, so you can fetch them like that, and then you can display them on top of a map. You can also have geolocation. So geolocation is basically giving the location based on your IP. So as I say, it's not like precise location, like location of your own place, but it's more usually at the city level. So yeah. And there is also an interesting API, but it's maybe more advanced, which for some of you who may know epsg.io, here we are kind of giving a way to access the same kind of information. So if you want to go from a source CRS to a target CRS, for example, WGS84 longitude latitude to Lambert 93, which is the official French projection system. You could ask our API, hey, what's the equivalent in another system, and you can also create all sorts of static maps with all sorts of options. Yeah, so this is an example of static maps. So on the left, this is one of my personal bike rides I've done at some point. So you can say, okay, I have a path that I want to follow, and it's going to be like of a given color, and I want to add a marker for the start point. And then you can automatically say, okay, I want the map to be centered around this path automatically, and I don't want to bother like finding what's the bounding box for it. So you can send all this data, and it's going to spit out a URL, and your URL is actually this map. You can do simpler shapes, like on Portugal, for example, the bounding box of Portugal written like drawn in red, or yeah, basically all sort of maps. And it's the same styles that are provided in the SDK. So winter, outdoor, street, or street dark, or all these styles are available for static maps as well. So we are kind of building an ecosystem around the MapTiler SDK and MapTiler Cloud. So we have recently been working on the AR control that extracts some of the map with terrain. We have geocoding control as well. And we have been working on the weather layer that plays well with our SDK. So I thought I would give a short demo of that. So if you want to have weather layer, so basically weather condition, weather forecast for the next 4 days with hourly snapshots replaced and refreshed every 6 hours. That's basically how it goes. So you have to import a map, import the layer for weather. Here, for example, the precipitation layer. And then that's how it goes. You initialize your map, you create a layer. Here, we don't use any option, just the built-in options that are there with the default color map, default opacity, and so on. And then when your map is ready, you can add the layer to your map. I also used to have a video for that. So basically, on the video, yeah, which is not working, you see all the clouds like moving across Central America here. And you can zoom in, zoom out. The data is provided by GFS, and internally we work on that to make it possible to be used on the tiling way. So yeah. So there is precipitation, and then there is also pressure. So in millibars or hectopascal, again available up to zoom level 3 or 4. I don't remember exactly. And then it's interpolated on time, so you could see like smooth animation of the weather condition. Here is like with radar. So radar is nice for detecting cloud or dust or all sorts of things. So dBz is the unit. Yeah, and so we'll have, of course, temperature. And as you you can, if you want, have the layer to be interactive in the sense that as you hover with your mouse, with your pointer, you can have information about like temperature, for example. And here is also maybe not super obvious, but like particle wind, which is also moving. And as you can see on the code snippet at the bottom, it's fairly easy to create this wind layer. So yeah. And then one of the options you have for any of these layers is to customize the color map. So on the right side column, especially on the lower corner, you would see some. Oh, actually, no, that's the one from the middle. Actually, the middle column, you will see some of the color map that are dedicated for specific usage, like radar in DBZ or temperature in centigrade. But some of the color map are like quite classic, like jet, turbidity, and so on, and Viridis and so on. So the usual suspects here. And for some cases, we thought it would be good to work on some color blindness friendly color maps. So some of them that are labeled actually in the code source are colorblind friendly. And yeah, so we try to work on that as well to be a bit more inclusive, because yeah, that's not done enough, I guess. So yeah, that's all for MapTiler SDK.
Just one.
Yeah, sure.
For integration with your cloud, just do you offer them for clients on the want to have connection to the internet around them?
So at the moment, it's not something we have worked on, but I feel like it's something that is definitely of interest. And yeah, at the moment, the connection to MapTiler Cloud is like not mandatory. As I said, you could have like a local system, but then you would still have to go with the regular MapLibre way of doing it. So at the moment, we don't provide yet, at least, snapshot of data, or at least I'm not really on this side of the project. Yeah.
Can you use MapTiler without any configuration?
Yeah, so let's say you have your own tiles, for example, hosted on your server, like your own data. Yeah, exactly. So one of the examples here were that here you see style maptiler.winter, but you can use the URL local, like / my server, blah, blah, blah. And then using the pattern like XYZ, for example, or a local style with your own source. This is entirely backward compatible to MapLibre GL. So if you already have the source and the data source and you're happy with it and you don't want to go with our offer, that's totally fine. We just provide styles that, I know, for base map that could be handy. But yeah, it's compatible with any sort of data. And same goes with custom layers. Like if you have tile layers, for example, with your custom data, your own weather data, for example, yeah, that's entirely compatible, yeah. Yeah. Support for what, sorry? Not yet. Yeah. What would be your use case with that, for example? The use case you would have for? Yeah, no. Yeah, at the moment, no. But it's very much a work in progress, and we are sort of at the beginning of it. And so, yeah, we are gathering ideas and, yeah, new features, ideas. Yeah, definitely. All right. Thanks.